Hi, welcome to the November 6, 2020 Club Cubase Google Hangout. I'm going to do a quick audio test to make sure everything is coming through okay, and we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. November 6, 2020. Okay, so my name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the Hangout today. I just realized that as I was looking at this that I may have scheduled the Hangout for the wrong day, so that may be throwing some people off. I accidentally scheduled it for this time yesterday, so but I think everything seems to be working, but it may have messed some people up, so I apologize for the confusion with that. I'll be the host for the Hangout today. I work as a product specialist for focusing on Steinberg products for Yamaha Corporation of America, which is the American distributor of Steinberg products. But we will go ahead and and I'm based in Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. So we're going to let some people get logged in. If you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us of where you're from, and we'll go ahead and get started in a few minutes. If you're watching the replay, you may want to skip ahead maybe a few minutes, and you could probably, if you're watching the replay, we should have the index of topics covered tonight. So with timestamps, and how the Hangout works is you could submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could actually enter them in the chat field. So generally the ability of the questions to be entered in the chat field far exceed my ability to answer them in a real-time manner. So if you ask a question, we'll try to get through all of the questions that are in the chat field. So I think with the confusion, we may have fewer people today. I apologize for that. But we'll go through everyone's questions that you have. So if you have questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat field. Or for future Hangouts, you can always put them in the, again, send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. So if you have your question and you're not getting an answer right away, if we could try to refrain from asking the same question over and over again repeatedly throughout the Hangout, that just kind of slows the process up. So that should make it so that we don't, things could be much faster to go along with that. So if we could try to avoid that. And also, if you ask, when you ask your question, if you could tell us what version of Cubase you have, you say I'm running Cubase 10.5 Pro on PC or Cubase 8 Elements on Mac, that information could be helpful. So. All right, so we'll let some people get logged in, and I apologize for the scheduling snafu. I just accidentally put it for the wrong day, but it looks like we have fewer people than normal, but we're seeing some people log in. So, and if you're watching this live, you may want to skip ahead. If you're watching on a replay, we'll skip ahead. All right, so there's some more people logging in. All right, so let's take a quick look at who's on the Hangout. All right, so we see Sir Robert Robinson from Atlanta. No one's watching anything going on in Atlanta or Georgia this week in the United States, so you live in the hotspot, Robert. All right, so we have John Costigan from Kenosha. We have Ace Amadeus from Texas. We have Roger from Barcelona. All right, so we have Soren from Sweden, Patrice from France, we have Ali from Iraq, Slovenia. All right, so we have Ben Shirley. Good to see you on a Hangout. We have Carlos from Colombia. Good to see you. All right, so we have Jan from Stockholm. And also, if this is your first Hangout that you're attending, let us know. All right, so we see Sub 403. He's from Canada, I believe. I think he's been in more Vancouver area recently. All right, so we have Kenny from County Durham in the UK. All right, so we have Berkshire. All right, so we have Philippe from Moscow. Okay, so just have a couple questions on what's my audio interface. So the one I'm using today is the Steinberg UR24C. All right, so we have Eric from Holland. All right, so we have Marvin Earl from Rhode Island, Newport. All right, so we have Midi Land. That's their first hangout. Thanks for joining us. Roger's on his second hangout. All right, we'll get started in just a few minutes. All right, and Sub 403 is originally from Calgary, but new to British Columbia. All right, so we have Bala from India. All right, wait just a couple more minutes. And if you guys want to start asking questions, we didn't have many questions emailed in this week. All right, so more people are getting logged in. All right, good to see Pablo from Galicia, España. All right. All right, so we have Hampshire from Old England. All right, so we have Portland, Oregon. Good to see Ball Alone music again. So we have a quick question. Can we ask whatever related to Cubase? Yes, any Steinberg products is fair game. Okay, so we have some more questions coming in. Maybe in our 2 minutes, getting people logged in. And I apologize, you may hear, like many of you, my family is home during this time. So my wife is working directly above me. So you may hear her on a conference call. My son is currently doing a school thing, but he may be coming home in the middle. So I apologize for any interruptions. All right, so good to see Philip French on. Okay, so we see David got Cubase 10.5 today. All right, good to see Jazz Dude. All right, we haven't started and we already have a thumb down. Someone doesn't like it already. All right. We'll wait just a moment. Maybe another 30 seconds and we'll get started. So feel free to ask questions. Okay, so some questions coming in. Okay, I'm going to switch views here quickly. Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and get started. So some more. Okay, so I'm going to scroll up and let's go ahead and get started. So See, Sir Robert is wishing me a happy birthday. It was my birthday yesterday. Thank you, Robert. I had a wonderful time. Got together with my friend who got me into computers and music way back when in college. So we had a nice lunch and got to catch up and great time with the family. So thank you for the kind wishes. Okay, so question from Ace. Hi, Greg. Hope you and your family are doing well. Could you please show how to access chords and then how to use circle of fifths to find suggested complementary chords, for example, E flat major seventh. Okay, so when we have a chord track, we could, as we start to enter chords in, I'll just erase this one. We could just kind of pop right here. And by default, you'll have just a chord editor, and we could kind of enter in different chords as we see fit. So as we want to enter in chords, we can come and just kind of enter these chords in. So let's say our first chord was an E flat, say a major seventh. Okay, so when we wanted to now kind of find different chord suggestions. Now, often you could have Cubase tell you, so when you look at this, there's a Chord Assistant tab. So if you have the next chord, you could go to the Chord Assistant. And at this point, we could choose to see chords based on proximity. So we see that, we go E flat, we can go to our dominant, subdominant, etc. So the more closely related harmonically tied notes are going to be closer in. And as we kind of go out further in the ring at this point, these are less harmonically related to that potential chord. And we could just come over here and see our circle of fifths. So if we just have this as, our E flat, at this point you could just kind of navigate and say, okay, the next chord should be B flat. Let's go to the next chord. And, you could just kind of keep going around the circle like this and say, okay, let's switch to this chord. And as we go around the circle, you've now done a jazz composition. So you could just kind of go around the circle of fifths, but you may not show up until there's another chord with a chord assistant. So the chord assistant, when you kind of start it, so let's say if I'm here, if we start the chord assistant at this point, and I want to go to this, from the first chord. So this will give you, your proximity based on that or circle of fifths, but you may not necessarily see it until there's so if I come here just from my first chord, depending on the part, you may not see, it may be blank until the second chord is added for that to have a relationship based upon the first chord. So that's how you could kind of use the circle of fifths and proximity, or if you look at the list, you could kind of tell different levels of harmonic complexity as well. So if you wanted to adjust that and have this based on cadence or common notes as well. So hopefully that helps, Ace. Thanks for the question. Okay, so we'll scroll through some of the different. Okay, so we had a question. Hi, what's the interface card you use? So I'm currently using a Steinberg UR24C. So if I wanted to go to my studio setup, I have this, but I have a number of different options that I could be using, including my Yamaha mixer that I use for the streaming, or the USB audio codec, which is from a USB-C hub. I could use my Rode NT USB microphone I use for doing tutorial videos or webcams, display ports, or built-in audio. So, but the one I'm currently using for the Hangout is a UR24C, and that's a USB interface. So it comes with the USB-C connector. So. Okay, so just see maybe the start of a question from Carlos. Okay, so we'll get to that a little bit later. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and, hi Greg, how can I avoid nasty noises when tuning with Vari Audio? Thank you. So, generally Vari Audio won't have any nasty noises. If you're doing extreme changing, one of the things that you could do with Vari Audio is, if I want it to come here, I'll just quickly go to my chord track and I'll create chord symbols from this piano part. And as we go into our Vari Audio, we'll take a look at our piano. This is our vocal part, so as we play. So, there's a lot of people I know that want to take, the music and just, jump it up an octave. So if you do kind of an extreme pitch shift like that, it's actually not too bad. But you could, if you do like really extreme changes, you may have some artifacts. But if I just wanted to come here and kind of nudge all these notes in tune, and you have in Vari Audio 3, you have the ability to show kind of default smart controls or show all smart controls. And, sometimes if you're doing some of the editing and you go to the lower left-hand corner, you can now adjust the formants of it. So let's say I'll just do an extreme formant change on this note. So it's kind of the same pitch, but you could adjust the formants, and this is often how you could make someone sound, younger who's older, or older who is younger. So if you're having kind of artifacts like that, I would try adjusting the formants, and that could maybe get, if you're hearing like those types of sounds, adjusting the formants on the individual segments can make a difference there with any artifacts that may have been introduced. So I would go ahead and give that a quick try. All right, so everyone should welcome Midi Land for his first Hangout and Roger Trilla for his second Hangout. We're glad to see you back. Okay, going through. We're still in some introductions. So a question from David Tilling. Can we ask whatever is related to Cubase? Yep. I'm not very smart on other things, so you could ask, but I probably won't know the answer. I'm kind of an idiot savant for Cubase. Okay, so the question, my question is how to know the right quantize for the rhythm. So let's say if I wanted to do some quantizing for a particular part, so I'll just take this guitar part here. So let's listen to it. So we're in 6/8 time. So we go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. So the pulse that like this part is going to have is going to be set up for eighth notes. So generally, kind of a rule of thumb is to make sure that the smallest rhythmic value in the part. So let's say if there was 16th notes in this part, that you would want to quantize to the lowest rhythmic value. So this is eighth notes. So if I chose to select all the events and I quantize it to, let's say, quarter notes, and I hit Q, so while it's an interesting effect, it may not actually, be the right rhythmic value for that. And if I wanted to quantize all the notes to, let's say, a whole note, like let's say if I was doing pads that were just held down for, for the 6 measures, and now I hit Q, you could see what's going to happen to the notes. But probably for this, the smallest rhythmic value and the main rhythmic value that we're working with is going to be an 8th note. So as I just do my quantizing here, so now I'll just quantize. And I'm going to change my click sound back. We had someone that said that their click sound wouldn't maintain, so my click sound's maintained now for Hangouts. So I will just switch it back to our default click sound. So as we listen to it, so you can see that, and with quantizing, what I do a lot of times, I mean, some musical parts, will be very heavily quantized, where it's going to be, if you're doing, like some EDM stuff where it may be like, it's going to be just like machine-like, and that's the reason. You may want to, that's a very specific quantize, where you want it to be heavily quantized. But sometimes, what I like to do for a lot of musical parts is I don't quantize unless I hear it and it bothers me. When we're working with computers, a lot of times, like, I could listen to this and it's not right perfectly, but it doesn't sound bad, and I could select all and quantize to 8th notes. And technically it's right, but I may want a little bit of rhythmic tension. So I approach MIDI quantizing kind of like, I like to do what, often what I call kind of spot quantizing. I think it's okay if it sounds, sometimes people look at the music and choose to edit based on the looks. Like say, oh, that note is early, but, kind of in context. That may be how real musicians are playing it in. And while, we look at it and say, oh, his timing is terrible. But, I think this musician, has been kind of a sideman to some of the biggest bands in the world. So I won't question his timing choices. And sometimes that's going to be intentional. But, for picking the quantized value, think of the smallest rhythmic value. So if you have like all quarter notes, and then a phrase of 8th notes, where it's going to be, I'll just create a quick part here. So let's say on this particular, I'll just do a quick quantize, like a step input. So I'm going to choose to do, let's say, quarter notes. And as I play in, or I'll just let me do 16th notes rather, or I'll do 8th notes since we're in 6/8. And now let's say I want to do 16th notes. So if I wanted to take these particular phrases, and if I choose, since the smallest rhythmic value we have is going to be 16th notes, if I select all these and quantize them to 8th notes, I'm going to lose kind of the 16th notes. So that's going to kind of lose the whole vibe. But if I choose to now quantize these to 16th notes, my 8th notes will probably be in good shape. And now my 16th notes will be maintained. So think of like the smallest rhythmic value in your part and use that for kind of your quantized setup. So give that a shot. Okay, so we have Hungry that's checking into family. That's checking in. Well, saying hello to the Cubase family from Jazz Dude. Okay. So I just see a question: when will Cubase free from dongle online verify? So, I'm sure that there's people that are looking at kind of different verification schemes. So I know it's kind of being actively worked on. But right now we have the dongle, and that system works pretty well. I know sometimes it could be an inconvenience to have to carry the dongle with you. But for a lot of people, it's also kind of an inconvenience to have internet access everywhere, especially if you're doing like live recordings and moving stuff around. So, but I know that it's being investigated and researched. So. Okay, question from Roger. Hi, Greg. Can you please tell us, is it possible to produce binaural music with Cubase tools? So when we go into Cubase, one of the things that was introduced with Cubase 10, and let me just pull it up here really quickly. I think I have a project. Let's see if I can find this project from that. I'll just open it up quickly. So, with Cubase 10 came the ability of doing Ambionics recording and mixing inside of Cubase. So if I wanted to, come over here, we could just look at, so if we wanted to do, we could kind of right click here, and when we add an audio track, we could choose for the audio track for the configuration, not to be mono or stereo, but you'll have where you could do like first, second, or third order ambisonics, and this will be kind of an object based, and this will allow you to take your binaural recording and kind of do your object-based editing with that. So if you wanted to do different head tracking as well. So if you come over here, we could say, okay, just wanted to have my VR controller, and you could choose, your different VR controllers. So as you move around, you're going to have options for all that. And as we go to, your inserts, you'll have your VST. You can just have your ambient decoder, as well as you could do different encoding options, and this will allow you to kind of do the spherical panning of all your stuff. So with Cubase Pro 10, that will have your ambisonics support for you. Okay, so let's see. Question on MIDI. Greg, do you have any tricks for editing MIDI that we regular Cubase users do not know existed? So that's a good question. Sometimes it's hard to know what people know exists or not. So let me just take a quick look. I'll open up a quick project here. Let me just jump back to another one. Okay, so stuff that people may not know exists. So let's say we have, let's go to my chord track here. Okay, so I guess I already have chord track in there. So when kind of doing editing, so some MIDI editing stuff, So if you wanted to select all of the same pitch, you could double click and hold down shift, and that will select all the notes. So if you say, I just want it to take, every D and turn it into an E flat, we could do that. Being able, a lot of people I think miss. So let's say if I have notes like this, the trim tool. So I could say I just want to take the end there and trim that. Or if you hold down Alt or Option, you could kind of do like different strum patterns if you wanted to kind of stagger. The ability to colorize based on different criteria. So if you want every pitch to be a different color, every MIDI channel, every part, or if you want it to be the chord track where you can see notes that are green are within the chord, notes that are red are out of the chord, and notes that are blue are within the scale. So you could kind of see if you move notes around pretty easily, doing that type of stuff. There's a lot of functions with, holding down like the Alt key or Option key and clicking on a note will actually split it. So if you want it to take let's say if we have, this is kind of an old film composer trick, where you take one long MIDI note in Cubase, and you could also, if you have the object selection tool, just kind of draw notes in. So let's say I have one long note and I wanted to turn this into a number of, different notes. So I will come right here. I'll just turn my snap on by hitting J. I'll cut. And let's say every eighth note I want it to cut. So I hold down Alt or Option with the scissors tool. And now you could split up and kind of do different melodies. Working with velocities, there's a lot of things that people miss. So if we wanted to take, let's say we have a velocity range going on. And now I needed to take all of, let's say, this range of velocity. So if I grab, if I just select, so let's say if I select the notes here, I could take this whole range of velocity and bring all the notes proportionally down. I could also kind of compress the contents by going to the right-hand side. So if I wanted those to be more kind of contrasting but increased, we could do that. Or I wanted these to kind of be more regulated, or I wanted to tilt the velocities so that I wanted to kind of keep velocity changes but have it tilt and go up but have some natural variations. So those are really handy tools that a lot of people will use. The transpose function I think is underutilized. So if you go to the MIDI menu to transpose setup, you could do scale corrections. So at this point, you could say I wanted to go up 7 semitones, and we could choose to transpose. You could also, when we go to the transpose, come over here and say, okay, I want to go down 7. Let's say 7 steps, but I wanted to do scale correction. So let's say I was in, A flat major was my current scale. So I could just kind of, select that, and okay, my new scale, I want to transpose to C major, but go down and do scale correction at the same time. If I wanted to take notes, just something I used to do all the time. And, we could use the arrow keys to go up or down, but if you hit shift arrow, you could go up and down by octave. So, and being able to just hit the left, right arrows to select different notes, and that will kind of sequentially go through different notes one at a time. So if you're looking for kind of like a clunker note, you could also do some of the MIDI functions. So if you want to do, kind of classic variations on a theme. So, if you're getting into Elgar's Enigma variations, or you're just looking for ideas, you go to your MIDI to functions, and then you could just say, I just wanted to, reverse those notes or mirror those notes. So there's some cool things that you could do within the functions. So those are a couple tips and tricks, but if there's anything in particular, I'm sure I'm missing like 400 little useful things, but hopefully that'll give you a new tip or trick to work with. Okay. Seeing comment from Jazz Dude that he wants to keep the dongle. So we have a lot of people feel that way. All right. My chat field jumped on me. Let me just jump back. Okay, just finding my spot. Okay. So just see a comment from DJ Mad. I feel Cubase is one of the best DAWs, but unfortunately the new generation don't know anything about it. I wish Steinberg would get rid of the dongle. So, there's, often why we can have a lot of new features is because, it is protected software. So, and we have lots of new, users all the time in Cubase. So, Cubase sales have been great. All right, so I see Millard Brown is going to cancel out the thumbs down that would start it before the Hangout. Okay, see Sir Robert Robinson boo to the thumbs down. So maybe we'll get them to change their mind. So, and we see Marvin saying never get rid of the security key. So we see that even within the group we have different opinions on it. So, all right. Okay, so we see a question. I have a band.wav files I'd like to import. Any recommendations? So if you have a number of files, let's say from a band recording, and it may kind of look something, a lot of times if you're doing live band recording, it may kind of look, very linear. Like, okay, we can see all of our tracks laid out. One of the things, if you just import a bunch of audio files and, it'll ask you if you want to put them on the same track or different tracks, you could choose to put it onto different tracks. And sometimes the files may just kind of show up and not necessarily be in time. So if we select all of the files here, one of the functions that we could do, or I could just come right here, is we go to edit, and then we could go to, I think there's a move to function right here, and then just choose origin. So most programs that are recording audio will do a timestamp on the audio file. So if the audio is all kind of in different locations, you could just say move to origin, and that way all the files will move to their timestamp. So when importing them, it's pretty easy to import the files, choose to put on different tracks. And if they don't sound like they're playing, make sure that your project in the project setup is set to the same sample rate as the audio files. I've seen some of the best, engineers in the world, do a project at the wrong sample rate. And some of the best mixing engineers in the world, and they got the files and no one gave them the sample rate and they just imported it, and that's what the project sounded like to them. That was the key of the project, and turned into mix to the record company. It's like, it's like a semitone off. Why is that? And just no one actually bothered to check the sample rate. So make sure that your project's set up, and you can do that from the project menu to project setup, or hit Shift plus S. And make sure the sample rate matches the audio files themselves. And then you should be kind of good to go. So give those a try and let us know if you have any other questions as you move on. Good luck with your project. Okay, so we have a question from Taylor. How do we delete a user preset? Okay, so it could be different user presets. So let's say if I come and make a track preset, so maybe Taylor's. Good to see you on a Hangout again. I think we missed you on a couple of Hangouts here, or you're just laying low. So let's say if I wanted to go to, I have this set up, and now I wanted to save track preset. So I will call this November 6th. Okay, so now when I go to load a track preset, I'll just search for November 6th. So, and then I think, so let's say if I go to my media bay and we choose to look for track presets here. So say, let's make this a little smaller. Okay, so we'll say so this is the preset that I've made, and then you could just right click in the media bay and delete it, and it'll ask you want to delete this file to the trash, and then you could just say yes, and then that track preset will be gone. So, and that would be kind of the same process for plugin presets. So, just do a search for the name in your media bay, right click and choose to delete. Okay, so a question from Taylor. With the UR22C, how did you get your mic input to show up in the track list? When I click the hardware tab in the mixer, it doesn't open. So when the UR22C is a little different than the UR44. So let's say I do a new project, and sometimes the UR22C, to see some of the settings, it doesn't like having the control room active. So if I want to come here, I'm just going to go to my outputs. And let's say for tracking, I want to set my outputs there, and I add my audio track. And then once I do this, you can say, okay, I want it to be a mono file, and I could see my inputs here. So let's say I wanted going into input 1, then I could just hit track. And at that point, that's how we could do it. So when we go to add, click on the plus sign. For the audio inputs, we could just kind of set that up there, and that could launch the audio connection. So once you have this input established, so let's say I have this set for input 1 and mono in 2 for input 2. So I have kind of very similar setup that you have. So say if I'll just add an audio track. We'll say mono in 2 and hit that. And then that will be, the input that's defined right there. So give that a try. and let me know if that does the trick for you. All right, so we have someone on a hangout from Lebanon. Good to see you. Welcome. One of my former colleagues was from Beirut as well. One of my dear friends. All right. Great comment from Jazz Dude. E flat major 7th is the first step to jazz. So, yeah. Okay. From Taylor, in UR22C, mic sound is still coming out on left. Constrained compensation solves the problem, but I like to be able to solve it without using that. So, I think I don't think I have a source connected into, let me just test, see if I have this mic going. So I think, Taylor, when we discussed this last time, let's see if I have, all right, so I have a microphone here. I'll do the old school, have 2 mics. So one is this mic will go, I'll adjust the gain up here a little bit on input 2. Okay, so, and I think, let me just talk into, let me see. So we can hear that. So, I think what you could try to do, if we went over this previously, without doing the constrained delay compensation, but you probably want to toggle when you go to your studio setup and come here and just try toggling direct monitoring. So now let's say I have a mono track, and let me see if I can mute my. So now that you have this set to, direct monitoring, so once you have that done, try just enabling direct monitoring. And I'm sorry I didn't have it set up, and I think that will kind of fix your problem. So I'm not sure if you tried that from the previous Hangout, but I did kind of show it in the previous Hangout, and you could probably do a quick search on Cubase index, but so a question, I see these live streams pop up fairly frequently. Could anyone just pop in and ask whatever related to Cubase in these live streams? I guess my question is, what is the purpose of these videos? So these videos, what we kind of do with the Club Cubase Google Hangouts is really just a kind of an interactive Q&A session. So you ask a question, you get an answer. So, ask any question that you want on any Steinberg related thing, and we'll try to give you answers. So this way it's not necessarily, we don't want to show you, the typical, the dreaded PowerPoint or keynote presentation. But it's really, so each Hangout is different based on the questions that people ask and the discussions that go on. So I think it's a good resource of different information that's available to access, and it's custom tailored to whatever you want to learn. And all you have to do is ask a question. So instead of us dictating what we're going to show to you, you ask us, and we try to give you an answer or solution or explain kind of the reasoning behind design decisions and how to operate the program better. All right, so question, is it possible to get MIDI or VST instrument takes to show up in lanes? So I'll just add a quick instrument track. All right, so say I'll just put this in kind of a 2-measure cycle record. So let's say I'll start. So, and it could be just depending on what MIDI record mode you're in. So when we come here, we can see like the MIDI record mode. So we can say in cycled MIDI, we want to do stacked record. So, and you could also access this from your transport menu where you can see MIDI record mode. You could do new parts, you could cycle, and there's MIDI cycle record mode. And here I could do stacked. So at this point, I'll just kind of do record. So now when I want to look at my MIDI part, and sorry, I had my audio recording at the same time. I'll just remove this for clarity. So when we see a part that looks like this, where we see kind of all the hash lines, that's indicating that there's multiple events kind of stacked in that particular area. So now I put it into lanes, and then each of the passes is now a lane, and I could use my comp tool just like I would for, you know, my audio parts. So at this point, you know, you could see everything done, but just make sure ahead of time that you put the MIDI record mode into, and I think by default it's set up to new parts, and those will just kind of be placed. You know, if I just recorded, let's say a new section here, I think that's the default mode. So if I have this, and let's say just hit record. So, and then if I hit record again, so those different parts will kind of be stacked on top of each other, and then you could see those in the lanes as well. So yeah, you can see the MIDI parts in lanes, just kind of same thing, same way, but you may want to make sure that you're not on merge or some other setting. All right, so we have Slovakia checking in. It's great. It's where some of my ancestors come from, Czechoslovakia. I'm not sure if it was in the Czech Republic or Slovakia. Okay, so my question is that how can we bypass all plugins with one button touch on the console? So let's say if I open up a project here. So, and if let's say we're mixing and I wanted to bypass all of my plugins, so we could just come right over here. So you see at the top, we'll see inserts, EQ, CS, channel strip, sends. So I think you have to hold down the Alt or Option. So you can't do everything, but if you wanted to kill like all of your inserts, hold down the Alt, and all your inserts, EQs, channel strips, sends can be just deactivated right there. So again, in the full mix console, and if you don't get that view, you could just hit F3. And at this point, hold down the Alt key. So you hold down the Alt key so that it's a bit more deliberate. The Alt or Option key. And click, and you can see that these are becoming bypassed when we see them in yellow. And you could do it just like that. If you have a number of inserts on a particular track, you know, so let's say I just wanted to come here, and I don't want to turn off everything there. We could just bypass all the inserts on a particular channel just by clicking just to the left of the word inserts in the channel editor. So hopefully that makes sense and helps So you could bypass everything, but it could be 4 clicks as opposed to 1. So. All right, so I just see from sub 403 to perfect birthday gift for me just to hit the like button, so I won't disagree. So, okay, so we have a question: is it possible to reset one very audio event? So let's take a look. So I'll do a quick very audio analysis of the bass here. So it may not be kind of like a reset, but if we come here, so, and if I just wanted to, change the note, we could change the note with that. So let's say let me just take a look on the settings here. So let's say I didn't affect this note. So, if you wanted to just do kind of your, these values, you could just kind of undo the percentage of the quantizing. So that will keep it kind of at the same pitch as you just selected. So you could, adjust the different parameters here. So let's say if I adjust the quantized pitch for all those events, and now I can see the quantized pitch, and I could adjust that one, but not affect the other choices. So you have the settings here, or you could just kind of undo the changes directly by just doing the edit again. Okay, so we have a question from Kenny Jobson. How much do you have to know about, say, piano playing to be able to produce a readable score using the score editor? I can produce decent sounding piano track, but I haven't a clue where to start. So let's go ahead and I'll show you kind of a part, but it's pretty easy. There's a couple little tricks to do with like kind of display quantization. So when I come, let me find one project where I have kind of just raw piano parts from before. Okay, so let's say if I'm here and I look at so say I wanted to look at this Rhodes part, and I'll look at this in, so let's say this is our kind of, don't it make you feel good? So I'll go ahead and just solo the Rhodes. So, and again, if I put on a click, it may not be perfect. If I look at this in the score editor, this could often be what, people despise of looking at stuff in a score editor, but we'll show you a couple quick tips. So let's say for a piano part, you'll see this little line probably just to the right, and I'll just double click on that. And I'll say, first off, I want it to be a split staff at C3. So I'm going to make this into just my, so I have a grand staff, so bass and treble clef. I want it to go to the main area here in this under staff settings. And I think this is in the key of A flat. So let's put it in the key of A flat, hit apply. Now, a lot of times when we look at our parts in the MIDI, just like we were talking before about the quantizing. So let's take a granular look at this particular part here. So we can say, you know, it's a little late there. Late. Early. Early. So we kind of look at the different parts, you know, with the grid. You go, okay, this isn't necessarily lined up perfectly. So when you go into the score view, you're going to have all these little hiccups and hesitations. So double click on, just on this little bar to open up these staff settings. I will come over here and there's some interpretive flags that are helpful. So maybe I want to clean lengths, overlaps. I was playing a little bit of a groove. But we have this thing called the display quantize. You can say the smallest rhythmic value I intended to see is an eighth note. The smallest rest I intended was a quarter note rest. So once I've set that, we can see kind of this, and you give that to a musician, they're just going to give you a bad look. And now at this point, I could just hit apply. And that's something that they could read very easily, and they won't hate you for that. So just doing a couple things like the display quantize, making sure you have the right clef, making sure you have the key. Those things will allow you to, generate a readable score. You could also, many musicians, as you're giving parts to, jazz musicians are great for this. And a lot of times you don't have all the parts written out. I played in many jazz groups in college, and I never had a written bass part. I got a chord chart. So you could come here and select all the notes and hit the C7 icon. And as you do this, you could have the chords kind of automatically generated as well, depending on the part. So at that point, Cubase can do an analysis or show your chord track, overlay the chord track directly in. So a lot of musicians will just look at chord charts, but just doing a quick display quantize, set the right staff, right key, and a couple of interpretive flags, and you could store those all as a preset. So once I, kind of like how everything is set up here, I could just double click and store that as a preset. So I know that this is kind of how I want pianos, this is how I want drums to be. And you could just simply save that preset and call it up and have everything set up for you. And turn the volume of my phone down. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's move on. Thanks for all the great questions. If you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. And if you're not a subscriber to the channel, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. So let's see. I see a great comment from John Costigan. I've always used random ideas in songwriting. Most are useless. Some are golden. I'm really going to use the tip of the Chord Assistant. Maybe I should get credit. Maybe I should credit it on album cuts. That'd be good. So, we'll let you keep the royalty checks though. So. Okay. So a question from Millard. Can my loops and samples be seen in the right side panel, even with the show all results? I'm not seeing, these are from VST Sound. Alternative is file browser, but more clumsy. So can my loops and samples be seen in the right side panel, even with show all results? All I'm seeing is from VST Sound. So make sure, if you're doing, if you're looking for like your own, let's say your own loops and samples, try going to the file browser. And at this point you could select the folder. So you can say, okay, I just wanted to come here, and here's all of my audio files in that folder. And now you could audition, each file that's in that particular folder. So see some percussion stuff. So, and if you're at a point where it's like, okay, I really like this particular file, right click on it, add it, add favorite, and now anytime that you're working, you could just go to your favorites column and you could just see your favorites column there. So give that a try, Millard, and let us know if that does a trick for you. Okay, so from Paul Alone Music, I'm having a hard time finding information on how to hook up and calibrate my USB controllers in Cubase 10.5 Pro, an Iwi USB, and an Alesis Sample Pad Pro. So finally got Cubase to recognize my Iwi, but having difficulty calibrating it. The sample pad, however, has not even been recognized by Cubase. So far, I haven't found any tutorials for this. So when, there's nothing really to necessarily calibrate in Cubase's side for an Iwi. So, Cubase just accepts incoming MIDI data from any source. So whether it's, drums, an Iwi, a MIDI guitar, MIDI bass, keyboard, a booklet, Rolly controllers, anything that kind of spits MIDI out, Cubase accepts gladly. So there's no real particular calibration that's needed. If you find that the controllers are sometimes putting out a lot of unnecessary excess information, like sometimes when I have let's say if I have my MIDI controller here, and my MIDI controller's been deciding to go to sleep on me a lot recently. I'll plug it back in. Give me a second. So, when you come to a particular, so let's say I'm here, like in this controller, I think has aftertouch. I'll find out in just a second. I'll go to my MIDI inserts. So at this point, we're going to enable MIDI monitor. So I hit a note, I see my note on message, but let's say if I hold the key down. All right, so let's say I just want to do a quick recording of this. So I'll come here, record. I'm just gonna hold down that one note. But when I look at this one particular note, so we can see that it captured a lot of aftertouch that was being generated by the controller. So, Cubase will, try to accept and accommodate everything that your MIDI controller is transmitting. So that's kind of the role of the sequencer. So if I looked at this part in, let's say, a MIDI list editor, we can see I have one note and a lot of aftertouch information. Now, if you wanted to block that aftertouch because I was maybe sending wrong information or clogging up the MIDI data stream, we could just come over here to the inspector. Let's go to the top tab, and you have just a little thing that's called the input transformer. And at this point, we could say, I want to filter out let's say controller. So I'm going to just say, let's activate this, and what I want to do. So now we're going to choose to filter out events that are equal to aftertouch. So as I have my MIDI monitor on, and I'll go ahead and let's just disable it and turn it back on. So now when I would hold down the key to trigger what was the aftertouch, the input transformer is filtering that out. So that way I just get a note on, note off message. So there's nothing really, the calibration is going to be on the controller side often. But if you see that it's like just spitting out way too much of some MIDI controller, and we can see this sometimes with, different guitar controllers as well, where, there's a lot of kind of, unexpected things are being transmitted. You could filter some of those out with the input transformer, but generally there's nothing in Cubase to calibrate, because you need to calibrate it directly in the device that's transmitting it. So, and if you have the Sample Pad Pro, depending on, if it's not being seen, if it's not being recognized by your computer, check to make sure, because a lot of times, devices could be USB, it can transmit MIDI over a USB connection, or kind of a more old school, kind of a legacy, if you will, kind of like a 5-pin, like DIN cable, like what a traditional MIDI cable looks like. So many devices, if they're set up they can be set up to send all the MIDI information out of the USB or the 5-pin DIN MIDI port. So if you have it connected via USB and the MIDI is being sent out of the 5-pin DIN, then Cubase may not recognize it. So make sure that you have it going to the correct output from the device, and it should be seen directly in Cubase. And Cubase uses whatever devices are a part of your operating system. So if you could go to your operating system and see if it's going to show, if you see it visible, either in your audio MIDI setup in Mac, or just go to your device panel on Windows and look under like sound, video, game controllers. And you should see the device if it's enabled. If it's not being seen by the computer's operating system, then Cubase won't be able to see it. So check those things and let us know what you find. All right, so we see Pete from Amsterdam is in. Okay, so we see Millard had a filter on, and that's another good point. So sometimes if you're looking for different loops, and let's say, okay, I want to look for, you could have these, we'll look at these, and these are kind of different categories that could be used for filtering choices, So I had someone that, couldn't find any audio files on their system, and they actually had, looking for heavy metal accordion soft as the criteria. So that's another good point. I'm glad you pointed out, Millard, but you could also just do a quick reset. So if you had an attribute selected here, and you're like, I'm not seeing anything, you could just click on the attribute reset right there, and that will kind of uncheck everything. So glad you got that sorted out. All right, good to see Agent K in Hangout. Okay, so we see question, how to add multiple stereo outs in control room for New York compression. So, generally you don't do a parallel compression in the control room. So the control room will monitor what you kind of have set, but we could do kind of your parallel or New York compression. I think it was actually developed in Detroit, but it's often so. One of my friends was the mastering engineer at Motown, wonderful man who ran a great recording academy in Detroit. And I think he was the first one that kind of came up with parallel compression. But let's say we'll show kind of what you could do with some parallel processing. So let's say if I wanted to take all of my drums here. So we don't have to do this in a control room. We can think of the control room as just kind of the monitoring source. So I'll take all my drums here, and what I want to do is I'm going to add, let's say, 2 group channels. So I'll add a group channel, and we'll just make these stereo. So we'll add the tracks. And what I'm going to do now is take all of the drums. I'm going to enable quick link and go to my sends. And I'm going to send them to group 1. Turn it on. So I'll just come here and so I'll take all these and I'm going to send them to group 2 as well. So we'll turn them all on. So now I see all my drums are going to 2 different groups. So what I want to do is to process one group differently. So I'll go to this. I'm going to turn on my compression and I'll run a really super heavy compression. So this is our super squashed. And this is our unprocessed. And what you want to do is to be able to just kind of blend these 2 together. So you have kind of the regular kind of punch from this one and the dynamics from this one. So one can be processed. So, but it's really, you know, think of the control room as the monitoring path. So you want to do it kind of with groups inside of the software mixer. So that's why you'd probably want to do it in the groups here and just listen to the results of the routing through the control room. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, we have a question. Greg, could you go over the different automation types? Example, touch, latch, crossover. Thanks. All right, and my timeline just jumped on me. Let me just... get it back to where we were. Okay. All right, so let's say if I wanted to do automation. So let's say I'll just do on my bass track here. All right, so we have touch. So touch automation is, you know, be pretty straightforward. So let me just... or I'll just solo the bass. I'll put it in a quick loop. All right, so I'll just grab my fader here. So now, and we can set our automation type here. So let's say touch. So touch will, I'm gonna enable automation. So I click on right, and now anything that I move the fader will stay. And we'll write the automation. And as soon as I let go of the fader, so we see that the red of the automation lane is enabled. As soon as I let go, it stops writing the automation. So when I go to auto latch, as soon as I let go, it'll still write that value of automation until I stop. So as soon as I let go of the fader and touch, that's when it stops writing. the automation. But let's say I know I want it to be, so we're in touch. I come here. So it's only going to write, I let go of the mouse or the control surface fader. So I release, it stops writing, auto latch starts writing, and then it'll just continue to write at that level, even if I'm not touching the fader. So I move my cursor away. So that will keep writing until I hit stop. Now, if I wanted to do a crossover, so let's say I'll make this automation lane bigger here. So what a crossover automation is going to allow you to do is if I wanted to, kind of start writing my automation, as soon as I go down, it will kind of kick out when I kind of go back to the original point. So now when I go there, so that's kind of what the crossover automation will allow you to do. So if you have like 2 automation points, it'll just kind of stop writing as soon as you get out of that point. So those are some of the differences between different automation. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. Hello, when you open the MIDI editor, how can you restrict to see only the bar you edit and not the whole project? So it really can depend upon, what it's more based upon what you actually choose to edit. So if I click, let's say if I go here, so let's say if I have, if I double click on this part, that's what I see. If I double click on a part that's a couple measures long, that's what I see. So, and you also have these little, show part borders. So if I click here, at this point, let's say, so if we just turn that on, so, if I double click on a part that's one measure or a couple measures, that's what I'll see. So if I double click on this part, I'm not going to see the whole lane. I'll just see, the element that I choose to double click, and that is what you see. So as I just click there, so it's really kind of, what you double click or what you choose to edit, those are the parts that will become visible in the editor. Hope that makes sense. So it's to see, why doesn't Cubase have pinch in and pinch out to zoom in and out when using trackpad? I have MacBook with incredible trackpad, but it's useless. Maybe a feature request, so you could do, a lot of, sometimes, a lot of functions can rely on kind of using 2 functions, but you could also just, hold down, if you wanted to look at particular areas, just grab the zoom tool and you could see kind of exactly, what you want. Or, if you wanted to double, just hold down G and H. And sometimes when we do different things, we have to make sure it's going to translate to all, different computer platforms. But, there's a lot of great zooming capabilities already. Okay, so we had a question. What happened with the function half tempo, double tempo from Cubase 5? It was very useful when using score that has to be read in alla breve, half tempo. This function disappeared. So, you could, if you wanted to do that, parts of it can be done in the project logical editor. So it may have been kind of just moved to there. So if it's with a tempo track, so let's say, so let's say I have my tempo track activated here. You could select your tempo values. So let's say I have these selected, and if you wanted like this region here to be half the tempo, go to your project logical editor, and we'll say media type is equal to tempo, track operation. And what we want to do is trim. We'll multiply by 0.5, or you could divide by 2. So at this point, I could just say apply, and I could do if it's selected, so let's say, and property is, I think we could just, property is set to event is selected. Then you could just simply do just like that. So the functionality may have just moved to the project logical editor. So try setting function to transform. We'll see media type is equal to tempo. If you want it to be selected or not selected, and you can just choose trim, multiply, or divide by the interval, and then you should be all set. So give that a try, and let me know if that helps you, Eric. All right, just seeing a comment from David. Just wanted to point out that the fact that this is awesome. Having Cubase live stream this often and answering any related questions that might pop up is a luxury. So, so we try to help out our customers. Realize there's a lot of people. We've had just such great interest in Cubase, especially, with all, over the years, our, popularity has grown significantly. Our business has been really strong, and we want to make sure that, people, it's always interesting for me, when people are speculating on new features and new versions, and people often, ask for feature requests, and, and people don't realize that 80% of their feature requests sometimes are already available for them. So, we realize that Cubase is an incredibly deep program that's evolved for 30 years. There's lots of ways to do a particular function, and we want to help people kind of, figure out the best workflow for them. All right. All right, so good to see Mandy Lane on a Hangout again. Okay, so I see Pablo just says, please, Greg. I'm trying to figure out. Let me scroll back and see. So not sure what the please Greg is for, but maybe if you could reiterate, Pablo, I'll probably catch it in an hour when I get there. So I just see a quick comment. Greg, I'm super pumped for version 11. Are you able to go through anything with this yet, or am I going to have to be patient and put next week's Hangout in my calendar? I think you should put every Hangout in your calendar. So, but there's nothing, nothing that we could show at this point, but put stuff in your calendar. So, all right. So just see how much Cubase 10.5 to 11. So, it hasn't been released yet. So, I don't know what the price is. And, as soon as it is released, you'll be able to check. I sometimes don't know all the pricing information for different countries. But, I'm sure when it's released, all that information will be readily available. All right. Another nice comment from Millard Brown says, from David's comment earlier, I could not agree more. I've been amazed by Steinberg's attention to their customers. we like our customers and we want to, and a lot of us at Steinberg use the software. So, we want to make it better for the customers and ourselves. If something is an irritant to us as well, we could fix that. So. Right. And from Andy, just comment, the stream is enormously underrated and Greg should get more love for it. So I'm glad that I could be able to help. So glad that it's been helpful. All right. Good to see Robbie Bowling on the Hangout from Dallas. All right. So we see Mandy Lane saying she runs Cubase Elements. It's great. Okay, so from Leon Ross, hi there, first time on here. Welcome to the Hangout. Just wondered if multi-out, i.e. multi-timbral contact disabled re-enable bug was fixed when saving a template, re-enabling disabled tracks. Let me just turn my phone off. When saving a template, re-enabling disabled tracks would randomize outputs. Okay, so I will go ahead and try it real quick. With I don't have Contact on my work computer, but I'll just try with. So add an instrument track. I'll try just a similar thing with Hallion. Okay, so let's say I have these tracks here. They'll be going to different outputs. All right, so, and I'll add some more instrument tracks, or sorry, I'll add some MIDI tracks that'll be routed to it. And so these are routed out to my Hallion instrument. So these are my multi-timbral, and these will all be going to independent outputs. So all right, so let's say I'll just disable these ones here. So I'll just choose the disable tracks, and I'll have the first one. And let me just re-enable one track at a time. So that's working. That's working. And let's enable this last one. All right, so that all seems to be kind of working on my end. So I know it's a different instrument. I know Contact still, I think they're still in VST2 and they haven't updated to VST3. So, maybe it's a VST2 thing, but that all kind of seems to be expecting, as expected. So maybe the bug was fixed. Again, I'm not sure which version you're running, but that function seems to be working fine. Okay. Okay, just see a comment from Andy. Apologies for the excited pestering. So is there a live stream on Wednesday? 2, does anybody know? Did catch the start of the stream? So, if, we're going to maintain our same schedule. So next week we'll be doing Tuesday and Friday. So sorry for hitting the microphone. You realize how annoying that is. But we'll be doing Tuesday and Friday. So next week. So just like our normal Hangouts, we'll be maintaining that schedule. Okay, so question. Hi, Mr. Greg. Can you tell us what was the problem with your MIDI controller on the previous Hangout and how you solved it? So I have a Nectar Panorama P4 in my office, and all I had to do is kind of, I just, when I restarted the computer, it started working, but it's been kind of dropping MIDI communication, and it kind of the operating system doesn't see it, sees it, doesn't see it, and I've tried to set up my account with Nectar to download. I'm just kind of running it as a kind of a class compliant MIDI driver, and every time I can't get into my Nectar account to actually download software. So, but I'll reach out to some friends, but it's been kind of just dropping in and out. My other MIDI controllers that have my studio are fine, but just the one that I have used for presentations and Hangouts is the one that's kind of acting up. So it's been kind of perfectly fine until like Tuesday. So I'll have to do some more investigation with it. All right, so we had David saying hi from Sweden. So question, do you think there should be different color schemes for Cubase? You can change a lot of the colors for Cubase. So it may not be, predefined color schemes, but if you want to check out some of the different colors, Mandy, what you could do is just go to your preferences. And then if you go to color schemes here, like if I wanted to change the, the project area background color, I could come here. If I wanted that to be brighter, we could sorry, I closed the wrong window. So let's say, let's go to the project, area background color. So I could move this up. And, if I wanted my editor background colors, so you could change a lot of the different functions and color schemes for the program directly, right in this general area. So if you want to go to the defaults, what you wanted to for active cycle, inactive cycle, reverse cycle. So a lot of these can be saved and just stored as preference presets, which could also be carried over in like a profile. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. Why are my logical presets in Cubase 10.5 grayed out? Okay, let me jump to another project. Okay, so we'll activate this. So let's say I'm here and I go to my logical editor presets, and some of them they'll be grayed out. It's probably because there's nothing selected for a logical editor preset to do. So now that I have a MIDI part selected, all of my presets are active. If nothing is selected, we go to our logical editor presets, so if I have, so it could depend upon whether something is selected or not. So that's probably it. So say if I have, my tempo or something else is selected. So I have my tempo information selected, I go to my presets, some of those may not show up. So it could really depend on what is actively selected. So give that a try. All right, so seeing just more kind of birthday wishes. So thank you very much for that. So from Paulo 1 Music. So thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so we have Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Good to see you on the Hangout. Thank you for all the birthday wishes. All right. All right, so I just see how to chat vocal pitch in Cubase. So I'm not sure what how to chat vocal pitch or maybe change vocal pitch in Cubase. So I'm not sure, there's a number of different ways of kind of changing vocals and the pitch of vocals. So if you have, I'll just revert this project quickly. There's plugins that are included. So there's the Very Audio, which is a very, incredibly intuitive and powerful vocal editing function. So if you wanted to, do your vocal edits here, you're able to do, a tremendous amount directly within Very Audio, but you could also do, in the lighter versions, we'll have a plugin called Pitch Correct. So if we come to your inserts, you could look under pitch shift. And one of the things that's really cool about Pitch Correct is, this is kind of like an automatic put it on and, your vocals will snap. But you could also kind of choose different formant preservations. So if I wanted like the vocalist to sound older, I'll just rewind it a little bit. So we'll put it back. And let's say I want her to sound like a really young girl. But here, here what you could do is actually just kind of set a scale. So you could actually, do it from chords. You could come over here and just say, I want this to be in, A flat major, and, it could snap directly to there. So, but if I'm misunderstanding your question of what the chat vocal pitch, maybe it was a typo. So, but let me know. Okay, and then Pablo is mentioning now that Michael Teams is on, that we could start. All right, that's good. So we have a question from David. This is not really a question. I was just wondering if anyone knows why so few people use Cubase. I'm a music student in Brighton, and I don't know anyone who uses Cubase. Sometimes, effective copy protection schemes are, can prevent a wide variety of people using it. So, and there's some companies that, have lots of users, but not many paid users, and they tend not to stay in business for a long time. So that could be a reason, but, I can assure you there's millions of Cubase users in the world. It's very popular. Okay, so a question from John. Morning, John from Santa Monica. I'm on Cubase 10.5.20 Pro, Windows 10. I just started getting into virtual instruments. When I create an instrument track, I also get a track called SysX Data. What is that? So this is probably, SysX Data is system exclusive, and this is going to be just like very proprietary MIDI information, with a particular instrument. So it used to be like if you had programmed a bunch of sounds for your synthesizer, it was custom for each song, that you could take all the contents of your synthesizer and do a SysX bulk dump. And that would, capture all the information from that and restore the instrument to exactly the state where it was before. And this is always a bit finicky. So with virtual instruments, I bet you don't see it with all virtual instruments, but I think it's like Easy Drummer. When you add it, just adds a SysX track by default. And it could be as you copy in a MIDI file that the MIDI file has SysX data in it. So I think, you won't find that for all virtual instruments. You may find it. I think it's Easy Drummer that does this, or one of the drum programs. So it's usually, it's pretty atypical, but I think maybe, how they have their patterns and different MIDI information when you drag a pattern in, that it may include SysX data. So it's kind of unique to one particular instrument. So let me know if you're noticing it with maybe Easy Drummer, John, or maybe when, or maybe, with a particular instrument. Okay, so it says there's a bug in Cubase when you import MIDI. Sometimes the preset of VST gets stuck. So when you import MIDI, so I'm not sure if it's a MIDI file. So if it's a MIDI file, and it says sometimes the preset gets stuck, what could happen with MIDI files is often if you have a MIDI file, and if I'm misunderstanding, just let me know, Mandy. If you have a MIDI file, that MIDI file, if it's like a commercial MIDI file, probably has a program change embedded. And what the program change does is it tells it to play back this particular sound. It was intended for bass. It was intended for drums. It was intended for a Rhodes piano or acoustic piano or an organ or strings. And that program change will send that program change. And if it's, a lot of MIDI files are written for a general MIDI instrument. So, and that way, when they're creating the sounds, they know that if you load it into a general MIDI instrument like Halion Sonic SE, that's going to play roughly the same sounds. So it's kind of a bit of a standard. And then there's kind of extensions. Roland had GS, Yamaha had XG, but general MIDI is kind of one of the key things. So if you're importing a MIDI file and it's always kind of playing and reverting back to that particular sound, it's probably going to be directly in, it's a MIDI message that's embedded in it. So if you have Cubase elements, what you could do is just double click, and in your controllers, you could just, click right over here and select program change, and you'll probably see program change. And it'll be set so that this time you could say, I wanted to go to strings, I wanted to go here, and I wanted to go to a different sound all in the same track. So try selecting the program, select those, and you could just delete the program change. And I think Cubase Elements doesn't have a list editor, but, the full versions of Cubase and like Cubase Artist may have a list editor. So, it's a very common thing to go into your list editor. And when you see, program change, you could just delete the program change directly from within the list editor. So if it's a MIDI file, it's probably a program change that's embedded in the file, and you just need to delete that. And then it won't always revert back to that. So it's not necessarily a bug in Cubase. It's just what the file is telling Cubase to do. All right, so we have Francisco B. Hello, I'm a professional musician wanting to learn how to use Cubase. I'm an opera singer, so hopefully feel free to ask any questions during a hangout here, and we'll be happy to help you out. So, and welcome to the hangout, and thanks for introducing yourself. Okay, so we have a question. I have a bit of a serious problem. I've been working on a mix, and there's a section where the audio glitches for straight at a bar and then goes back to normal. So when we kind of work with this, a lot of times, you may notice that the CPU meter may, kind of creep up when you're doing that. Some things to try. First thing I would do is go to your studio setup, select your audio interface, go to the control panel and try raising the buffers. The lower the buffer, the harder the computer has to work to process all the information. So if you're kind of in the mixing process, raise the buffer, and that will give a lot more kind of processing headroom for your particular project. If your buffer is already raised, you may want to try actually printing those different files, printing the effects on the files. And you can do it a couple of easy ways. So, one is to just kind of select, the tracks. And when you click on it right here, you'll see like a little snowflake icon. And then you could freeze the tracks, and that will just automatically take the insert effects and be able to just, apply and render those files for you. So give those things a try, and I think that should kind of resolve your problem. All right, reading through different questions. Okay, reading through different comments here. So I'm seeing Michael Team wants people to hit the like button. So we have a question. Is it true that if you buy Cubase Pro, you get unlimited MIDI and audio and VST tracks? So I think there may be 256 VST tracks, but basically, yeah. So there's no kind of fixed limits like you have with the Cubase elements. Okay, so see comment from Andy Nicholson, dropping a lot of knowledge bombs, I think. Sorry, my chat room just jumped on me. Let me scroll back. All right, so sorry if I may have lost a couple of questions in the chat. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. How do I add a newly recorded track event directly into Media Bay where I can immediately edit metadata? So let's say I'm here, I add an audio track. And I'll just record. And I'll give it a better name instead of audio 1. So we'll say November 6, 2020 audio. And now I'm going to hit record. All right, so just recording like kind of a blank audio file there. So we have this audio file. So you don't have to drop it into MediaBay, because MediaBay can just, if it's already kind of looking for the particular file, you could tell it. So I say, let's look for an audio file. And I'll just kind of type the name in. And, you could actually tell it to, okay, go on this computer. I think it was under Documents, Projects, and I didn't have it look in that folder. So we'll say, okay, let's go to this folder, and there's the file. So that's the file we just recorded, November 6, 2020, audio_1. And now you could just add your metadata. So, you don't have to import it into MediaBay. If you have the folders kind of automatically linked, as soon as it's recorded, MediaBay will look into the actively selected folders that MediaBay is looking at, and it'll be there so you could enter or modify different metadata. Okay, just reading through comments. So I see a comment from Andy. Junkie XL uses Cubase. Yeah, he's been a long time user. I think he just, super nice guy, incredibly talented. But, so I was just showing him some stuff a couple weeks ago. So he was very excited. Okay, so we have a question. Why is the library audio loops not following project tempo? It used to work flawlessly before. It just suddenly stopped syncing. So, if you're kind of in a project, so let's jump back to this project here. So if we wanted to have files that were syncing, so, at this point, like if we're going through different drum loops, we could choose to have the drum loops, audition, so if you wanted to come here, we could, audition in the tempo of the drum loop. So if I'm here, but let's say if I switch from 100 beats a minute to 50 beats a minute, this will just kind of play back. So say I go to 150 BPM, and then I select the same file. So it could be just, if you're auditioning in a MediaBay, just having this particular function will, if that is turned off, that will allow you not to do it. And as you drag a file in, it will kind of, if it has the different metadata, it will play back at the project tempo. So let's say if I play that too fast, and let's say I slow it down now to 100 beats a minute. So it's all, and if I wanted this to be independent, you could just turn musical mode off. Then whatever tempo I type in, it's going to play back. So I go 150. It's going to play back at the same tempo, but if I enable musical mode, then it will be like a tempo parasite. One other thing that it could be is that the track itself can be in linear or musical mode. So, if it's in musical mode and I change the tempo, the values will kind of change with the tempo and speed up and slow down. But if the track itself is set to linear mode, that track will stay at the same time position even with tempo changes. So a couple things to check. Okay, so I see a question, what's the date for Cubase's release? So it's, when it's announced, and then when it's ready, I think, we'll find out. So the release date hasn't been announced yet, so. Okay, so we have a question. Can you edit audio before compression, fix dynamic range? So I'll just do a new project here. And we could show a couple of scenarios here. So let's say if I have... Try to find something that's not so compressed already. See if I can find something quickly. It's not... Okay, let's try this. So let's say I have this file and we wanted to... Okay, so, if you're doing kind of, so you often like editing will be kind of, slightly different for, than the dynamics. But it could be that maybe the dynamics were already kind of embedded in the file. So let's say if I have these two files and I kind of separated them. So let's say... And let's say I just wanted to go to like an insert on this particular one, and I just want to do kind of like a heavy compression on it. So let's say I just put this on. So we're going to lose some of our dynamic range just like totally squashing it. So if I like that particular sound, I could just grab that insert effect and I'll apply that to the file. So at this point, I'm just going to take this insert, drag it over, and now it's kind of compressed that file. And I'll just kind of modify it there just to kind of give you a sense and add a bunch of makeup gain. So, when I look at these two files, like in the sample editor, I could see often kind of the results of compression. So it doesn't really, so the editing tasks will kind of be the same if there's, different compression, and if you just have it as an insert effect, as I come here, it's kind of independent of the actual audio editing. So, but I could be maybe misunderstanding your question, but let me know if you, if that's the, if I'm misunderstanding. Okay, so just seeing a comment from Andy about, I don't think it's against the rules to, if you wanted to post, maybe you could send a private message to someone if you want to share your YouTube channel. All right. Okay, so I just see a comment from Andy Lane. Please update browser with zoom in and zoom out or bigger font. And I guess this is probably for the media bay. And sometimes when we have your media bay, and I can see where, you have, but often it's not uncommon for our users to, need to be able to access, hundreds of thousands of files in Media Bay, and working with such large numbers. That's why kind of the font could be a little smaller, but I could pass that on as a suggestion. But let me just see if I go to like my loop browser, if that, so. And, we've got people also will just put it on a separate display monitor so that could be running at different resolutions as well. But I'll pass that along, Mandy. Thanks for the comment. All right, so just see a question is, anyone tried Nuendo? So Nuendo will have all, currently has all of the features that Cubase has, but it also has some very specialized editing and functionality. So it's going to include support for Dolby Atmos. So if you want to do kind of spherical surround processing with height, it's going to have tie-ins to game audio engines, such as Audio Kinetics Wise. It's also going to allow you to do like really phenomenal ADR, like replacing dialogue in films, reconforming. It has kind of network collaboration built into Nuendo. It's going to have, but basically if you're, doing music production, it'll be the same. But if you're doing, post-production, some additional sound design, those functions is what Nuendo will offer over Cubase. Okay, so we have question: is there a way to move audio clips up and down the grid without moving left or right? Thanks, Greg. So let's say I have this file, and if I just hold down the Alt, so I could make a copy by holding down the Alt key, and if I started to move it downward vertically, then so the direction I moved it first. So now I can move it while holding down the Alt key, and I can make a copy. So I undo that. So let's say I hold down the Alt key again. I see the copy, but now while holding down the Alt key, I hit the Control or Command key. And that will restrain the direction. So I'm going to move this vertically first. And now I can't move it in time. Another function you could do is you could set up key commands, and you could do this under the nudge. So there's a nudge key command for up and down. So let's say we'll go to the nudge category. So I have this set to Option Shift down, down arrow and up arrow. So now I could take this particular function. So I hit Option Shift, and I could just nudge up and down. So I could go to the next one, nudge up and down. Let's select the next event. So I'm just holding, so under the nudge category, you can just move up and down vertically, just like that. So something else to check out. Okay, so I see more speculation on Cubase 11 release date. So I'll be happy to show it to you guys when it's available. Okay, reading through. All right, so we have Jazzy Spoon, longtime Cubaser, first time being on one of these Club Cubase Hangouts. Thanks for joining us, and hope to see you on future Hangouts. And anytime you have a question, just let us know. Okay, we're doing well on time. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great discussion. All right, good to see Gareth on a Hangout. Okay, reading through more comments. So it's just a question, Greg, are you composer or DJ? Or I guess I started off as a musician. So I started off playing trumpet, then I played electric bass, and I studied in college. I did orchestral stuff. So playing string bass and double bass, did that pretty intensively while doing production stuff. And after college, I did worked at a big recording studio in New York doing a lot of hip hop stuff and, like Naughty by Nature and Miles Davis sessions, and then been working with Steinberg for a number of years. So, but I'm not a composer or a songwriter. So, but I've, gotten to help people that, are incredibly talented writers and musicians over the years. Okay. Hi, Greg. Hope you're well. Is there an option to copy automation keyframes in the render in place settings? So I'm not sure what you may have to clarify what the keyframes are, but let's say if I have like an automation for this particular event. So I have this loop and it goes down. And if you wanted to embed that within if you wanted to embed the automation within the render in place, we could go to render in place, go to render settings, and we want to choose complete signal path. And at this point, I'll just click on render, and we should see the audio file here. If I did everything, just try that one more time. So I'll just make it kind of loud and soft. So I'll just choose complete signal path. See, maybe I'll just try on one more part. But I think if you choose a complete signal path, that then the your processing, like the automation, will be included within the render in place. I'll try it one more time. Make sure I have volume for my automation. All right, let's just take a look at this. Yeah, I must have some routing thing on, but so if you try that, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding about the keyframes. But I think if you do it, I must have some routing thing off today. But I think if you do the, check out the, settings sort of complete signal path, that the automation will be kind of included. So. I see a comment indicating that I'm the Oracle. I just kind of move a mouse and talk and hit a couple keys on the keyboard. So there's lots of really smart people and make my job easier in Hamburg. Okay, so a question, please. How can I do vocal harmony just with instrumental? Let's say I took a beat, record my voice, and want to do vocal harmony. Thank you. So let's show that. All right, so let's say I have this particular file and I wanted to do harmonies. So let's say I'll just play just a little. So at this point, I could, just add. So if you have a beat and maybe you don't know what the chords are, we could select the part and just come to your audio menu and we could generate harmony voices. So I'll just say, let's do one harmony voice. And as we look at that, so the harmony voice has been generated. Now, sometimes, you may want to give Cubase kind of an idea as to, the chords that are present. Because sometimes Cubase will generate like a third or a fifth, but it may not work within a particular key and match the music. So if you know that you're in a major or minor and what the key is of the beat and what the vocalist is singing, and I'm going to determine the key directly by selecting the piano part here. And I'll just go to my project to chord track and say create chord symbols. And now when I select a part, it could look at the chords for that particular region, and it could generate the harmonies and have those chords be correct. So even if you just kind of take a stab, if you don't know what the chords are, we'll say, okay, let's do number of voices is 4 voices. Hit OK. At this point, I'll just kind of bring the volume of this down. And Cubase will generate the harmonies. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so Uno Momento is wishing me well, so I'm doing great, thanks. I see comment at Motown Records. Oh my God, yeah. So it is, wonderful, wonderful man named Bob Dennis, who, in my travels is always someone I look forward to just, talking with for, 15, 20 minutes whenever I could just pick his brain. And he was, one of the original mastering engineers at Motown. So, like he was there when Stevie Wonder was there for his first session. So, and really, just someone who, did amazing work kind of spreading knowledge in the community of Detroit. So then he just passed away maybe last year. Really wonderful man. I miss him. Apparently I need to write some pirate music. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so, all right, so a question. Hi, a great product. Just wondering why the faders read different numbers than in the black screen next to them. I believe the black screen is accurate for dB readings. Why though? So let's go ahead and take a quick look. And we'll just do this with a quick test tone. Okay, so I'll just take this particular track and just insert from the tools menu, just a test generator. Okay, so I could see that as we have this going on, that I have the value here set to minus 12 dB. And let's say I'll turn this off. All right, so I'm just going to reread the question. So just wondering why the faders read different numbers than the black. Okay, let me just try with a quick, something a little more dynamic. All right, and just gonna check my audio card, see if I got. All right, so as I look at this, we see, so when we see the position here, this indicator that we see that's different than here. So like here we can see -12, that's where the signal is. And this number is where the fader position is. So if I have a signal at let's say at -12, and I had the test tone generator, so that is why you kind of see, so this is where that position is versus where we have, where the actual meter is. That's why you see kind of the different numbers there. Okay, question. What's the difference between parallel compression and using the dry mix control on the compressor? So in essence, it gets you to the same result. In the long run, sometimes people will do more using groups if there's a number of different sources. Like I want to take all the background vocals or all the drums, and that way you could run one compressor instead of like 12 compressors for drums to, and to control that. But, as we've kind of gotten into the software realm, we try to keep the same production paradigms that people are familiar with from analog. But at the same time, you realize that, if you could just make those same adjustments in the plugin individually, that you could kind of do it both ways. So it'll kind of get you to the finish line either way. Okay, going through, you see Gareth is having his Friday night pizza. So, okay, reading through comments. See, Gareth is going to hopefully get, I guess he's participating in an online workshop with Andrew Sheps. I got to do a panel with him once for Audio Nowcast, kind of a podcast. Okay, so we see Captenergy Music is on. So question, how can I factory reset Cubase? So if you wanted to go back to kind of the initial values, all you'd have to do is when you start Cubase is hold down Alt Control Shift, like right after you start Cubase, and hold that down. And then you'll have the choice if you wanted to disable or to delete the program preferences. And on Mac, it's Command Option Shift. It'll give you kind of the same exact functions. So you could delete or disable your program preferences, and then it's just like starting from scratch. Okay, so we have a question on how to randomize velocity. So let's say I have some MIDI notes here. And let's say I wanted to randomize the velocity of all of these pitches. Okay, so what you could do is a number of different ways. One is, in the editor itself, we could choose to go to, so let's say if I select the track, we could go to the MIDI modifiers tab, and here we could choose to say randomize velocities between, let's say, 80 and 110. So now that will play back the random velocities. If we wanted to embed that, if I did everything right, I could just choose freeze MIDI modifiers, and that will freeze those particular parameters. We could also take a different approach and go to MIDI to logical editor. And I say I want to transform, let's say, our notes. And let's say, so what I want to do is to take value 2 of our notes and set to random values between 40 and 70. So now when I hit apply, that will just transform notes, and value 2 in a MIDI note message is velocity, value 1 is the pitch, and we tell it the operation to set random values, and we can set the threshold, so if I say between 40 and 88, I could just come right there. And every time you do it, you could just randomize the velocities between those and come up with new interesting results. All right, so we have more questions when Cubase 11 will be done. So when it will be out. So when it's done. So okay, reading through comments. So Gareth wants workflow improvements in Cubase 11. Okay, so I see Pablo's comment from earlier was a joke. So sometimes I miss the context of it because I'm so far behind. Okay, so we have I am Pike or Peak. Thanks for creating this content. Checking in from Spain. All right, so we have a question. Greg, why does Cubase Artist not support trivial function like multi-export? So, I'm not sure if, multi-export is a trivial function. It's a pretty involved, once you start getting into all of the different options that are available. So, but it is one of the distinctions between Cubase Artist and Cubase Pro. So. But, when you start thinking of processing and channel widths and file management and naming, it's I wouldn't call it a trivial function. So, but, you could do, there's kind of other approaches that you could do with, bouncing, internally or using, the bounce selection as well. Okay, just gonna move on. All right, so we see kind of some of the repeat questions being repeated over and over again. If we could try to avoid that, we'll if we don't get to your question, it's not that we're blowing you off. We just want to, we just it takes a little while to get up to all the questions. So just see Captenergy Music. So if you want to send me a link to a download for the Nectar Panorama, that'd be great. But I do have a lot of friends that work there, so I could give them a hard time about it. But if you have it as well, that'd be great. Okay. So we have a question from Paul Claridge. Can you go over using audio loops from Media Bay with chord track, not just drums or bass, but guitar and piano? So if the audio loop is set for, if it's going to have a chord based function, currently with the chord track, it can do it for monophonic audio. So if if we had an audio loop of a piano or guitar part and we say, let's make it from a major to a minor chord, or let's add a ninth, or do a flat fifth, it's not going to go into the polyphonic aspects of the detection and changing. So if that's what you want to do, Cubase doesn't do that. But it's, there's some programs which attempt it, but, kind of the results, can be a little iffy. Okay, so we got a question from John Wells. Got another question. A while ago, I got a Sapphire Radeon RX 550 GUI card. So after the latest update, it suddenly took over Control plus Shift save as function. I can't give Control back to Cubase 10.5.2. So if the Radeon card is, taking over just a save as, that seems pretty extreme for that software, because that's a pretty common function. But make sure that, if there's a control panel, maybe there's a running program in the background for the Radeon. So you could try to disable that, and I know we ran into some display drivers with Dorico for one of the functions to move a note up or down an octave would, the default key command for some of the display drivers was to flip the screen upside down. So that was always fun if you forgot to turn that off and before it was released, so, you got to move a note up an octave and all of a sudden your display is upside down. So it just flip it 180 degrees. So, but probably there's a user assignable keyboard shortcut, because that's Control Shift S is a pretty standard Windows shortcut for save as in most programs. So, but check that and see. Okay. All right, so we have Randy from Keller, Texas. Good to see you on a Hangout. See birthday wishes from Gareth. You being here is the present, so you don't need to bring any presents. So I have too much stuff as it is. And other nice birthday wishes, thank you. It was yesterday, so. All right, reading through. Reading through different comments here. So a question, will Cubase run on Surface Pro? So we have lots of people running Cubase on the Microsoft Surface. I have a little, like what I'm reading all my chat comments on is on a Surface Go. But I haven't installed Cubase, but it could work, but we have lots of users using the Microsoft Surface Pros. I think they're pretty cool computers. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so I see, hi Greg, happy birthday, thank you. I'd still like to know how to activate the pan display on your mixer. So if you see, like sometimes my mixer pan settings can, when you see them kind of go from this kind of very traditional, we could also have kind of a combined panner. So we could get kind of different functions here. If your project has a surround channel or a surround component, so let's say I go to my audio connections and I'll come over here and let's add a 5.1 output. You can now see that I get my panners kind of more square-like. So, but as soon as it doesn't give you any more functionality if you're just doing stereo tracks. But if you remove the 5.1 bus, at that point, you have kind of the traditional panners back. So maybe that's what you're referring to. Okay, sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. Okay. Okay, so another question, kind of maybe I misunderstood it before, but editing audio for dynamics before applying compression. So one thing that I see a lot of people do, and one of my friends does like tons of huge records, worked with David Foster for number of years, and what he would do is just come and kind of take each word and just select it with like the range selection tool. And if you didn't want to do, he didn't want to necessarily have to run multiple stages of compression. So he would kind of select, individual phrases like so. And if you wanted to adjust, so as we come in here, you can say, oh, this, I want it louder, softer. He does this on, kind of all, of his vocals just to kind of regulate each word, and he goes very precise with it, so, I mean, he's, whatever he does, he's obviously incredibly successful. So, he's done, Whitney Houston and Barbra Streisand and, all sorts of, Michael Bublé, all those kind of, very, singers that have, are very honed into their craft. And he will just kind of, before he applies compression, he'll just kind of come here and chop each word. I had another friend in Austin who would do this, and he would call it the cut and run automation. So give that a try, and I think that would make sense. And sorry if I misunderstood your question earlier. Okay, reading through comments. Okay. Seeing some comments about tutorials in Spanish. That's great. Okay, question. Hi, Greg. I can't work out how to use the pencil tool to edit volume levels in an audio file. Just drawing on a track. That makes sense. So, so if you're here, you could also, and one of the great things about kind of this function is you could do this editing kind of pre-gain. So, but a lot of people may also just kind of come here and do just kind of like pencil. So let's say if I wanted to go directly on a word, you could just kind of draw in with your pencil and make, different parts louder, softer. And again, you could do this, pre-fader before it hits any of your processing. So if, you have, you could choose to kind of split one particular word. So, select it with the range tool, hit Shift X and be able to just say, I need to bring down this whole section. So at this point I could, just, adjust the volume like that, or, switching to my draw tool. If I wanted to, if you had like a plosive that you wanted to draw out or in, you could do stuff like that pretty easily. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. Okay, Oren. Hi, Greg. How do I send my project from old computer and email it to myself to new computer? And how do I take the same project with me to collaboration with another friend? So, the easiest way to do this, when you have, you could send a project file, but there's probably a good chance that the project file has a lot of other audio files. And that may be too large to actually email. So, if you have a number of vocal tracks, I know, or that you do lots of vocals as a vocalist. So that could, pretty quickly exceed like the typical limitations on email. So when you want to do that, again, just, if you have a USB flash drive, it's very convenient just to go to your file menu, choose backup project, select directly from your USB, to your USB flash drive, and just do, create a new folder, and then all of your files will be placed onto the USB flash drive or an external drive, and move that to your new computer, take that over for your collaboration. So once again, file to backup project. Right, reading through comments. Okay, so it just says my record track starts automatically to record when I'm recording another MIDI track that's enabled. So if you run into that, so it's probably not recording the actual chords, but it may be sounding the chords. So if I have this set up, we could say use monitored tracks. So let's say if I have this turned on and I audition chords, that, and I'm just gonna see, I think I lost my audio interface. Let me just try switching real quick back to it. So, but what you could do, so it may be like as you're recording that you're hearing the chord track, just select the chord track and just click on the mute here. So if I have this selected, often, as I click on the chords, that could audition the chords, but just click on the mute there and see if that makes it. And I think that will stop the chord track from sounding every time, a new chord comes back. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Can you talk a little about macros in Cubase? So we could kind of talk conceptually about what macros are. So macros, we have people that often will be doing, like the same 8 steps over and over and over again. So, so what we could do is take many of the different steps that are used to create, different editing tasks. And, these are often keyboard shortcuts or functions that could be accessed through keyboard shortcuts. So I was talking with composer Benjamin Wallfish, wonderful composer, and he wanted to do, he wanted an easier way to hit something, name a marker, and get out, like while he's listening to it. So, instead of stopping, going to the marker track, adding the marker, opening the marker, name, and then closing it. So I designed a macro for Benjamin, where we come over here, we say, activate marker track, and then insert name and marker. Because in Cubase, you could have up to 10 different marker tracks. So let's say if I'm here, let's add several marker tracks. Okay, so these are all marker tracks. So let's say if I wanted to run this macro, and you could actually assign keyboard shortcuts to the macro. So I will come here, and I wanted to name, so instead of having to stop and, do different functions, what a macro does is it executes all those different tasks to speed up your workflow. So I'm on this one. I'll go to my markers, which I can access, or my macros, which I can access. I'll say activate a name. So I can say, vocal in, and then I hit Command M. And that's named that marker when I'm here. And you could assign a keyboard shortcut to trigger the macro, which I probably have, but forgot. So I'm here. Okay, this is where strings come in. And then Command M. So this will take whatever track you're on. And be able to do that. Now, I've also made like a macro, and we can show you kind of one that's a bit more involved. I think I have it on here. So let's say like I had a breath that was like really annoying, like a on the vocal. So let's say if I wanted to come here, and this was an annoying breath. So I think I made a macro. We'll just make sure it's on here, where we could basically, minimize breath. So what this does is, and this one's a pretty involved macro, but it will, put locators to selection. It'll split the range. It'll switch to the object selection tool. It'll go to the left locator. It'll select the event under the cursor. It will move one frame and then basically drop 12. We will decrement the volume by 12 dB. And then reset some of the settings. So if I wanted to, if this phrase right here, this little section was a breath, I could select that. And instead of doing that manually, like if we do it 100 times a day, now I could just come to my macro, that I made, and we'll just say minimize breath. And it'll just go through and execute all of those steps. So that was like probably maybe 20 steps or so for the minimize breath macro. So I could do that manually, and that's great if you get paid by the hour. Most of the time, we tend not to get paid in the hour that way, or if you are doing that manually, you don't get paid by the hour when people are watching you work. And now you could just come there and just kind of, minimize breaths. And that's kind of the power of macros, that you're able to, assign that to a key command. And at that point, just kind of plow through and customize and really do like super tweaky, fast things. So, and when you see like many of the composers, whether it's Junkie or Hands or, Trevor Morris, they have these touch screens that are set up, and they spend a lot of time. And what they're doing a lot of times with those touch screens is they're just firing off like logical editor presets. They're firing off custom made macros so that, I want to do this, you hit one button that triggers their macros, and they've worked very long to have these macros set up because, if they have to, if they could cut down something 100,000 mouse clicks and you hit the button, on the touchscreen that triggers the macro, you just sped up your workflow. So. All right, so question from Oren. Greg, do you know if Absolute 4 will be on sale for Black Friday and how much it will cost? If not, do you have any idea when it will go on sale? So I haven't heard of the Black Friday sales yet, but I would save some money. There'll be, I know that there will be some, but they know I talk to a lot of people, and so I don't get kind of some of the information in advance. But there's always there'll be some great stuff coming. And, so there's always new stuff from Steinberg in the works. Okay, so I think from Dina, I think we may have covered this before, but, changing the amplitude, with the pencil. So you can see just kind of grabbing the pencil tool. So if you see it at top, and then you could click to kind of add a point and be able to adjust the volume just like that. So give that a try. Let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right. So Gareth Daughter says hello to everyone on a Hangout. It's good. Okay, so question, should I write orchestral music via MIDI or should I play it with a MIDI keyboard? It really kind of depends on, what you're, if you're a good keyboard player, that's obviously, it can make a lot of sense to play it in. But, some of the different aspects that you could do kind of playing, like as I'm here, let's say I wanted to take this, like I'm I'm not a great keyboardist, but I should learn after all these years of, but it's not my primary instrument, but I can be expressive. So, if I come here and, kind of the key is to, convey emotion, convey expression, so, and I see a lot of people like in notation programs over the years, and, and I think Dorco has helped in this field so much. But, historically, I see people spend so much time entering in MIDI in like for an orchestral thing, and then they play it back and it just doesn't sound musical at all. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Like here, if I play notes, So, but so that's all kind of one dynamic. And it could be not so exciting, but if you actually just use the modulation wheel, and you could kind of regulate the dynamics of so many libraries. You know, just using your modulation wheel. So if you have the ability to kind of play in and, you know, use an expression or modulation wheel when you know, the instrument allows you to utilize that for more expressive performances, I would do that. And I think that's a fantastic kind of musical way to put your MIDI in. And I think it's easier to, you know, play back and, you know, have, you know, and kind of do the modulation wheel, you know. And when I watch some composers play, you know, I'm like, oh, his left hand is his bow and his right hand is, you know, is kind of like his fretting, you know, or like, you know, what's on the fingerboard. But, you know, when you watch composers switch between the different articulations and use the modulation wheel or an expression pedal, you know, it's those things that, you know, make what is a mock-up sound, you know, incredibly musical. So, but whatever kind of, you know, gets you there can work. I've seen some people put everything in step entry mode and spend a lot of time to try to get the musicality back, you know, so. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to export multiple tracks but going through a specific bus which has a chain of process? So when we do the export audio mixdown, currently we could, so let's say when we do our export audio mixdown, we could have our effects channels rendered separately. But this won't necessarily take into, and we could have our groups rendered separately. But let's say if I have a project here, I'll just jump back to this one. So let me just put it back to a reasonable tempo. Okay, so let's say if I have this going on, you know, I want to send this all these tracks to my compressor. So let's say I can send it to a group and put, let's say, my compressor on it. So say now they're heavily squashed. If I take, like, you know, these files here, so let me just crop that quickly. And I wanted to just export these, but going through the groups or the master effects, we could just do an export audio or a render in place and go to your render settings and say, okay, I want it to go through the complete signal path. And now as we render, we could choose to that will then process those files, you know, directly through the entire signal path. So try a render in place, and that should, you know, make a difference for you. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next question. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so I see I got my revelation in for Gareth of restrain direction, or constrain direction on moving parts. Okay, so with Dina's question, we could just kind of come over here. So let's say if I blow up, and it's about kind of the events. So we want to just on the event itself, select it and just grab using the pencil tool, just click and put in the different values like that. All right, so we have, I think it's, okay, it says we have, I think it's Kolja from Belgium, finally made it to the live hangout after watching so many replays. Greetings from Lockdown, Belgium. So welcome to the hangout. Thanks for joining us. And he apparently has many friends in Houston, Texas area. That's great. My brother lives there as well. So just see Naughty by Nature, that really takes me back to the magic of high school. Yeah, they were kind of fun guys. I think they paid for a lot of studio time kind of hustling pool games in the studio. But when they did, was a hip hop hooray, hey ho, I was the guy who had to go out and get the guys in Times Square that had the buckets. So they had the guys with the buckets kind of come in and they recorded them. So it was my job as the second assistant. Okay, so we're seeing Kolja from Belgium says he's learned a whole lot from the Hangouts. Wish me a happy birthday. So thanks. We had a great day yesterday. Okay, hi Greg. When saving a project to another folder, such as an external hard drive, how can I export the entire project and its related audio pool to an external drive without getting the error message? So, when you save, the project file, has references to all of the audio files, that are contained within the project. But if we wanted to, the best use, if you wanted to move everything over, the easiest, safest way is just to choose backup project. This will prompt you to create a new folder, a separate, distinct folder, and it will copy everything over to that new folder, which could be an external drive or just a different folder. And this is also helpful, and I've had many very high-profile engineers and producers who, we'll do multiple clients, multiple albums, all in one single audio folder. And they delete a file, a new file gets recorded, and then suddenly, I got a call from a producer, and all of his tracks were, playing back files from different artists. And, the best way to do that was to just do a backup project. And that's kind of the safest, easiest way to do that. Okay, so question, can Loop Mash output individual voices? So let's take a look. Okay, so let's say I'll just go ahead and play. Let me find just preset with some more information. Okay, so let's say I have okay. So I can, let me just find the right range of keyboard notes here. So once we have just a particular pattern, so let's say, let's see if I can find the right octave. On my controller. See if my controller is decided to check out. It looks like it's okay. But once we have this set up, each of these outputs in loop mash can be set to each one can be set to a different output. Here, let me just see how I remember, so see if it's under. But, you can, it may be just fixed. So let me just go to my loop mash here. So now as I play back, we'll get to the mix console. Each of those different sources will be just sent. So once we activate all the outputs, this will be fixed to output 1, 2, 3, 4, so 5, 6, 7, 8. And at that point, once it's been activated here, we could just, once all the outputs have been activated, these will just be fixed, and then each of the voices could then be kind of rendered independently. So let me just see if I get the right octave here. Give me a second. But, once you have the MIDI note, then you could just do a render in place, and each of the outputs will be rendered independently. Okay. So I just see from Greg, you missed my question. So if I miss your question, sometimes I may periodically I'll see if I can get it. But if you want to re-ask it, like once in a while, my chat field will jump, and then I don't have I could lose some. I could lose some questions. So if I missed it, please feel free to ask it again. Okay, so just see a comment. Thanks, Craig. I've used Cubase since 1989. I'm almost 60 years old. Made mainly theater music. Every day I find something new in the program. Thank you, and Steinberg. Yeah, so I'm still, I think every Hangout I'll learn something new as well. So I'm continually learning new stuff. Okay, so we had a question, how to add echoes in your vocals. So let's just jump to this project. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. If you have learned something new, make sure that you hit the like button and that you have subscribed to the channel if you're new. So let's say we have, there's a couple ways you could do echoes on vocals. Some people will just come over here, right click, and let's add a delay to particular tracks. So I'll say, let's add a stereo delay. And let's make this just like a dotted quarter. And then people often automate.
That was okay. You're so alone, I was so naive. Now you're packing boxes, ready to leave. Our musical history laid out on the floor.
So you could do something like that. So let's say if we just listen, that will now be automated and play back.
I turn it up, you wouldn't mind. Up until now, that was okay.
So I think that'll be coming up.
You're so alone, I was so naive. Now you're packing boxes, ready to leave. Our musical history.
So you could do that. Now, something else that people will do often is use kind of the render in place function. So let's say if I have this turned off. So I'll take this file, select a range, and go to audio. And we'll just choose plugins. And I'll just say, let's go to default. And I want it to be a mono delay. Okay, so I'll just choose proceed. Okay, and I want this to be just a quarter note delay. And what it's done now is it's just rendered that delay onto the file.
That was okay to
So, and then if you select a clip, you could modify, add other processes, or just delete and kind of be right back at square one. Okay. So hopefully that helped. Yeah, so seeing more comments. I see Jazz Dude says been using Cubase for a long time. It's a challenge to find out how to make it work the way we need it. So, people have different approaches and different perspectives. So it's great that I think Cubase does a really good job of being able to work in a musical way how people want to. So I see a question, what will come with Cubase 11? Eternal happiness. So, sorry, just my phone. So question, hello, are you a Cubase designer? So I don't do any software development. That's all kind of done in Hamburg, Germany. So I just kind of hopefully can communicate what they do. So I don't design any software. I will give lots of feedback. But I don't do any development. I'm not that smart. Okay, so off topic, I guess, will Cubase support iLok Cloud? Using USB key puts me off. So, currently we don't utilize iLok, so we do the eLicenser technology. So, and we're aware that it's an irritant for a lot of people. So I know that they're doing research with other solutions, but currently it's just going to be the USB E licenser. So you see from Dina, Greg, does Cubase Artist have render in place? About to upgrade and can't see if it does. I don't believe that the render in place functionality is in Artist. If you want to send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to just confirm. I would have to kind of restart my computer real quick, but I don't think it's actually in the Artist version, but I could confirm. I could confirm for sure if you want to send me an email. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. Bear with me, my timeline, my chat field just jumped on me. Let me just... Okay, hello, Greg. Can I turn audio into MIDI to determine the chords, which I could use in a chord track? Thank you. So currently, when we do the audio to MIDI conversion, it's going to be for monophonic audio. So it's not really designed to do, conversion from chords into MIDI. So from audio chords into MIDI. Okay, so up to Cubase 9, I could choose my own track colors. Since version 10, we get 16 colors, expandable to 64, but I can't get the shades I want. Can we please get back to the unlimited colors? I think it's going to be that it's there. So let's say I'm going to hit Alt or Option plus Shift S. And then when you go to the colors, just double click on the colors. And here you could see, in your blues, or in your green family, so you could adjust the amount of red, green, blue. So, you could choose kind of which color you want to start with and, be able to kind of adjust accordingly. So I would try that. But a lot of people miss just the fact that you just double click on the colors and then they could be modified as you see fit. So try that. So I just see, will Cubase Pro 11 fixes CPU management on Mac? So I wasn't aware of any CPU issues. I know sometimes, a lot of plugins don't scale across multiple cores. And people will assume that's a Cubase issue, but it's kind of how the plugin is designed. So that's something to be aware of. So you may say, oh, Cubase isn't utilizing all my cores, but it's one plugin that's taking, 90% of the processing on one core and it can't allocate and split its processing across cores. So maybe it's something with that, but we'll see what comes inside of Cubase 11 when it's released. I'm sure they're working on it. All right, so we see John Wells solved his Radeon Control Shift S problem. Yeah, so didn't realize that your graphics card can have its own keyboard shortcuts. All right, we don't have to worry about speaking Spanish in chat. I just can't read it as well. So you can type any language you want. So I'm just the quintessentially dumb American who only understands English. Took a little bit of Spanish in high school, like 4 years. So. Okay. So I see a comment from Richard Bint. Hey, Greg, you have the downmix presets open. Did you find what's causing the red occurrence? Some kind of overload? Cheers, buddy. I haven't, and this is, I think we discussed this on a Hangout a couple weeks ago where we could see in the control room, like these functions that turn red. So I'm not sure why they turn red. I'll see if I get some more clarification on that, but I haven't found like a specific pattern. I don't think it's overload, but okay. So, hey, Greg, what's the best way to record MIDI and play VST instruments with low latency? Is the button at the bottom left corner for that? That's kind of the intention of that. So if we have lots of plugins like on your master bus that are imposing, we'll call it the latency tax. So if that's imposing that, what the constrain delay compensation button will allow you to do is to just kind of bypass latency heavy plugins so you could play in with performance in real time. Okay, so question, is it possible to create an entire default track config, primarily inserts and track control maps so that you can work with the mouse as little as possible? So if you wanted to do that, to have kind of like your known starting off point, and, it's very common for people to, have everything set up and, like, okay, I'm always going to do dynamics on drums. I'm going to have this on vocals. I'm going to have these on guitars. I'm going to have this for my orchestral strings. And once everything is kind of configured, just simply save it as a template. And then anytime you start a project, you could just, load up the template, drop the files in, and that could save a tremendous amount of time. Okay, so question, wouldn't it be nice to sing a melody like a brass section trumpet, record it, and be able to use it to trigger a VST? So let's say if I just wanted to do something like that, I'll just take kind of maybe this phrase. So at this point, I could double click. We'll go into our very audio editor. We'll have it do its little like improv, and then we could choose under functions to extract MIDI, and we could put it with our note and pitch bend data, and we will just say, let's put it into a new MIDI track, hit OK. And then that little improvisation is now just MIDI data that can be played back with any virtual instrument. So you can kind of do that already. So we have lots of people that write that way. Okay, hey everyone, Greg and at Cubase. What's the best way to print a MIDI virtual instrument, orchestral into audio tracks? I like doing the, just a render in place. So at this point, let me just look for one particular project here. So if you have different orchestral stuff, just render in place works really well. Sorry, I'm just getting a call from Mark Mancina, composer, did like Moana and stuff. I'll call him back after. So let's say if I have, like strings and brass here. So let's say I have, like these guitars, and this is just like any MIDI part. And let's say a bass part, and all you have to do is you could select the tracks themselves. For time's sake, I will just select, multiple events here. And at this point, just go to render in place. And I'll just say, okay, I want this with effects, and I want to the original source tracks. So we could just mute the source tracks, or we could also delete them. And what they'll do is just simply turn those from audio directly into MIDI. And I had it set to bounce down. So let me just change the settings there. So at this point, I'll unchoose mix down to one file, and I could select multiple events, and it's just going to render it. It'll mute the original tracks, and it will carry over the colors. So at this point, my MIDI has been muted. We could also have the tracks deactivated, and it's just now showing the audio. All right, so question from Lucas Jr. Hi, Greg. I have a question, please. I have a 1440p monitor. Should I tick the high DPI resolution? What's the meaning of that option, please? So what the high DPI is, and we saw this like on the Mac, you have the Retina display, and you also have like 4K. So what the high DPI is going to allow you to do is to have, more precise screen resolution. So with a 4K monitor, you could see things you can see 4 pixels for every pixel at like a 1080p resolution, or you could have it be like ridiculously small and see lots of real estate. So, a 1080p, so 1440p monitor, may have, everything, could do like a high DPI scaling, depending on your display. So I would turn it on, restart, and see, if it looks better for you. And if you like the appearance of it and you notice it between the interaction between your graphics driver, your graphics card, and the, and the monitor, if it looks sharper and crisper, great, you could do that. Or you don't have to run it, because if you're running at 4K resolution, it can take more CPU performance, because it has to draw 4 pixels for every 1 pixel that was doing. So you could see how it works for you on your particular system. But it's kind of an interaction between your display driver and your monitor. So if your display driver is only doing 1080p, then you're not going to benefit from it if your monitor is 1440p. Okay, just kind of reading through some great questions here, comments. All right, so we have people checking in from Switzerland. Okay, so hi, Greg. I've just tuned in. When is your next Wavelab out? So nothing's been announced, but I'm sure the developers are working on stuff. So just saying, comment from Pablo that Loop Mash is amazing. Guess I never had a chance to use it. So yeah, you could definitely get lost in that over a weekend. Okay, so question, is there a way to randomize MIDI velocity automatically? So let's say if we have a MIDI track, I can select the MIDI part here and I'll go to my input transformer. And I think we might be able to do it from here. So let's say we want to transform, type is equal to note, and we'll choose value 2 and set the random values between 50 and 70. So you could apply that on input as you record. So once again, just kind of click on the little squiggly line here and you could see local control for that and just enable that. And you could do that on input automatically. Okay, so we have a question on a MIDI track. What does the fader do? So the fader here will be set for MIDI volume. So this will be like your MIDI continuous controller 7, so CC7. And so we could have this kind of interact with the automation for the instrument, but the fader for the MIDI track is just MIDI CC7. So that's MIDI continuous controller is for the volume message. Okay, so we'll just move on. Just a comment, that was great what you just showed with the delay. That's a great handy tip. All right, so we see, hi Greg, I used for 5 years Cubase 8 Pro. I'm about to change to 10.5. Should I wait till 11 version comes out? Thanks. Sometimes there's a lot of people that may purchase an upgrade, right before a version comes out. And right now, if you right before a version comes out, if you bought the program, there's going to be like a 30-day grace period generally. So if you bought it now and Cubase 11 came out soon, within 30 days, you could get the upgrade to Cubase 11 free as part of a grace period. So it might be a good time to upgrade it to Cubase 10.5 now, because upgrading from 8 to 10.5 will be less expensive than upgrading from 8 to 11. So you could read into that. Okay, so we see a question, is there out there free templates for Cubase? So I know a lot of people are, I think templates are, I think there's lots of people that have different templates. I think Chris Salim, who does a lot of Cubase tutorials, has free templates, and other people are having them as well. I think some people try to sell them. So there are, different templates floating around. Okay, see, nice comment. You are our guru, and yes, you are that smart. I think, I've met a lot of the developers at Steinberg, and, they're a different kind of smart than me. So I missed that day in school. But thank you for the kind words. Okay, question, is there a date when we can expect Cubase 11? So, there's lots of rumors floating around, but, I can't really comment until it's announced and released, but so. Okay, so question, can I use Cubase 10.5 to control a Tascam D88 to bring audio tracks recorded into Cubase? So, with the D88, if you had an audio interface that had it was called a TDIF, the Tascam Digital Interface. Some of the RME converters, like the ADIs, will have a TDIF interface, but you could transfer digitally using the TDIF interface, but you're probably better off taking an analog out. So you could, if you have like an audio interface with 8 analog ins, it would make sense to take 8 analog outs from your D88 if your audio interface doesn't have TDIF. So if you had like an early Motu 2408, those had TDIF, and then you could transfer it over digitally or analog. If you had there was a sync card, I think it was a sync option, if memory serves, and this has been a long time ago, is an SY88 card, and that would allow you to do MIDI machine control. So you could use that to transfer, what I would do, the easiest way is just to take an analog out of your D88 to inputs, analog ins, and just hit play from your D88 and, just capture it in Cubase. If you have the SY88 card and a sync, like a MIDI timecode sync box, you could do that and sync the two. But if you're just kind of transferring, that may not be necessary, and it could be kind of a bigger hassle. Okay, so question, how do you get the effect where, say, a cymbal fades in, but it's dull sounding and it fades and it reverts to having the top end that a cymbal has? I think it might be something you EQ with automation. So generally it's going to be kind of actually within the sample. So I think we could maybe take a quick look. Let's say if I just do one from like Iconica. So I think this might be what you're talking about. All right, so let me just find. So this is just kind of let me see if I can find it in percussion map here. Let me just see if I can find this. So I think what you want is maybe something like this sample. But a lot of times what you hear is just kind of like that sample that's kind of. So a lot of times that's just kind of in the sample where you do that crescendo it's kind of ideal for doing a lot of kind of transitions between scenes and stuff like that. So most of the time it's not a processing thing, but more of the actual sample that's being used. Okay, we've got about 15 minutes left. Thanks for all the great questions. So just seeing comments about if there's kind of survey information for age distribution. So I think Steinberg has some of that information, but I'm not sure if they release it. Might be more internal documentation. All right, my chat field just kind of jumped. Bear with me. Okay. Okay, so hey Greg, question from Jesse Carmichael. Good to see you, Jesse. Hope you and your family are well. So a question about the software naming. Why is it 10.06 in the software, but showing 10.5.2 in the Steinberg download assistant? So the 10.52 is the latest version. So, going from 10.x to 10.5x, they're kind of different generations. So with that, you may, if you would have to, if you had version 10 and wanted to do 10.5, the latest version of 10, I think, was 10.06, and the latest version of 10.5 generation, which came out, 2019, and 10 came out 2018, is 10.52. So it could be, if you're on 10.06, that you might be a version behind the most recent version. Okay, so we see, hi, I've got Cubase 10.5 AI and I'm missing Beat Designer. Do you know how to make it? I don't think the AI version has the MIDI plugins, so that, if you wanted to upgrade, you could probably, upgrade to get that functionality to get the Beat Designer. I think like Cubase Artist has it. Cubase Elements might. Okay, so we have Neurotic Nexus. Hello from Germany to everyone and to me. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we're seeing people that switch from live to Cubase and are loving it. Michael Teams wants everyone to hit the like button. So just see about VST Transit says my shared project is missing my audio files on the other end. So I don't think, let me see if I have VST Transit. Open here, see if I can get in quickly. All right, so let's say if I just wanted to, you could go through, your different projects here. Okay, so I may not have some of the files to synchronize, but if you want to send me an email, I'd be happy to kind of take a more detailed look at the VST Transit for you. All right, so just seeing, Greg, does Cubase Artist have render in place? I don't believe it does, but if you want to email me, I could just check. But if you go to the Steinberg website, you could see kind of pretty clear delineations between the different versions. So. Okay, just seeing more questions. I'm just going through. Okay, so I think I may have hit the end of the chat. Let's see where we are time-wise. So we have about 10 minutes left before we lose all of our free closed captioning. we'll see if there's any other questions. Just wanted a few Hangouts. We didn't have any questions that were really sent in for this Hangout. So, but see if there's any other questions. And if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, you could do that. If you, have learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. Okay, so all right, so a couple more questions. What's the best way to get a software VST MIDI part exported to an audio part? Just like we showed just a little earlier, I like, render in place, I think is quite handy. So if I wanted to take these, and if you're in Cubase Pro, you could just go to your edit menu to render in place, and I'll just choose render with current settings. And this will just go through. So that's just kind of taking all the parts, and we could join the parts together, have them all be independent, and that will just render them and mute the other parts if you have that selected as well. All right, we'll see if there's any other questions. So I like kind of doing the render in place. So you see those events are muted. These are treated as audio. All right, I'll wait just another second and see if we have another question come in. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I hope that everyone has a wonderful weekend and everyone's staying safe and healthy. I'll just give it another 30 seconds or so. So we'll do our Hangout on our usual days next week. So look for Tuesday and Friday at the same time. All right, so I guess we will go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. If you haven't hit the like button, make sure you do that as well. We hope that everyone has a wonderful weekend. Please stay safe and healthy. And we can see you guys. We'll see everyone on Tuesday. Take care. Goodbye.